وحيث الفتى يرتاع في ظلماته من القبر يلقاه سنا متهللا هنالك يهنيه مقيلا وروضة ومن أجله في ذروة العز يجتلى. Assalamu alaikum. Listen carefully to these two recitations of Surah Al-Fatiha. Maliki yawmi d-deen, Maliki yawmi d-deen. Did you catch the difference? One reciter says Maliki with a long sound. The other says Maliki, short. If you've heard both and wondered which one is correct, you're not alone. Many Muslims assume there's only one way to recite the Qur'an. Others hear these differences and worry. Does this mean there are contradictions? What's the truth? Both are correct. Both are Quranic revelations taught by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself. But if that sounds confusing or even impossible, then you need to understand something most Muslims have never been taught: the science of Qiraat. To understand why these differences exist, we have to go back to the very beginning, to revelation itself. What are Qiraat? The word Qiraat is the plural of Qira'ah, which means a mode of recitation. But these aren't just styles of recitation. They're not regional accents, they're not scholars' opinions or later additions. Qira'at are divinely sanctioned modes of reciting the Qur'an, different ways the Qur'an was revealed and taught by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let me be clear, these are not different Qur'ans, they are not different improvisations based on dialect, these are not optional stylistic choices. Qira'at are how the Qur'an came down, not variations invented later. This is critical to understand. The differences you hear today between Maliki and Maliki, or between ta'lamun and ya'lamun in other verses, these existed from the time of revelation. The companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam learned them. They transmitted them, and centuries later scholars systemized them into one of the most rigorous preservation systems the world has ever seen. But to appreciate how this happened, we need to go back to Arabia before Islam. Why did Qira'at exist? Arabia in the 7th century was not a unified nation. It was a patchwork of tribes, each with its own dialect, pronunciation patterns, and linguistic features. The Quraysh spoke differently than the Tamim, and the Hudayl had distinct pronunciation from the Asad. And while they could understand each other, the way they spoke, the sounds they made, the grammatical forms they preferred varied. Now imagine this. The Qur'an begins to be revealed. It's not a book to be read silently. It's a text to be recited aloud, memorized and transmitted orally. Allah Azza wa Jal could have revealed the Qur'an in only one strict phonetic form, but that would have made it extraordinarily difficult for many tribes to recite with fluency and ease. So Allah Azza wa Jal, in His mercy, revealed the Qur'an in multiple authorized modes. And this is where the hadith, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, this Qur'an has been revealed in 7 ahruf. Recite it in whichever way is easiest for you. Now we'll dedicate an entire episode to what ahruf means, because it's one of the most debated topics in Quranic studies. But for now, understand this. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't just allow variation, he taught it. Umar ibn al-Khattab once heard Hisham ibn Hakim reciting Surah Al-Furqan in a way he had never heard before. Umar was shocked. He had learned this surah directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how could Hisham be reciting it differently? Umar waited for Hisham to finish his prayer, almost taking him while he was praying, but he stopped himself. After Hisham finished praying, Umar grabbed him and brought him to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet ﷺ asked Hisham to recite. He did. The Prophet ﷺ said it was revealed in this way. Then he asked Umar to recite, and Umar did. The Prophet ﷺ said it was also revealed in this way. Then he said, this Qur'an has been revealed in 7 ahruf. Recite it in whichever way is easiest. Think about what this means. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say one of you is wrong. He didn't say pick one and stick to it. He affirmed both recitations because both were part of how the Qur'an was revealed. This is the foundation of Qiraat. The differences were not mistakes. They were not innovations. They were recognized, taught, and preserved from the very beginning. From revelation to science. After the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the companions spread across the Muslim world. Ibn Mas'ud went to Kufa. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari went to Basra. Mu'adh bin Jabal in Syria, as well as Abu Darda. Abdullah ibn Abbas remained in Mecca. And each companion taught the Qur'an exactly as they had learned it from the Prophet ﷺ. Over time, distinct schools of recitation developed in different cities, not because people were making things up, but because they were faithfully preserving what their teachers had transmitted to them. But here's what's extraordinary. The early Muslim scholars didn't leave this to chance. They built a science, ilmul Qiraat, to document every valid mode of recitation, verify its chain of transmission back to the Prophet ﷺ, systemize the rules that govern each qira'ah, eliminate anything that couldn't be authenticated. This wasn't guesswork, this was rigorous scholarship. Scholars like Imam al-Dani, Ibn Mujahid, Imam al-Shatibi, and Imam Ibn al-Jazari, they devoted their entire lives to preserving these recitations with chains of transmission so strong, so meticulously documented that we can trace every recitation we hear today back to the Prophet ﷺ himself. Nothing entered the Qur'an later. The science of Qiraat exists to protect what was already there. And the result, today when you hear a Qari recite in the Qira'ah of Hafs an Asim, or Warsh an Nafi', or Qalun an Nafi', or Duri, or Khalaf, you're hearing exactly what the companions of the Prophet ﷺ taught. Word for word, letter for letter. So let's return to where we started. Maliki yawmi d-deen, Maliki yawmi d-deen. Now you know this isn't a contradiction, it's not a mistake. It's a window into how the Qur'an lived among the first Muslims, and it's proof of something extraordinary. That the Qur'an you hold in your hands, the recitation you hear in Salah, it has been preserved with a level of precision, rigor, and devotion unmatched in human history. But this is just the beginning. In the next episode, we're going to answer the question everyone asks: what's the difference between ahruf and qira'at? And trust me, it's one of the most important distinctions in Quranic studies. Until then, when you hear different recitations, don't be confused, be amazed, because what you're hearing is the living legacy of the Prophet ﷺ, preserved by scholars who gave everything to protect the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Uniting hearts through the Qur'an, one qira'ah at a time.